tying to this, in fact, and taking the transcripts from the film as a reference, and one of the questions that I prepared for Alma, which is, it ties exactly to what you've been saying after here, and which is linked to the sentence where he says, you are the object, you are the art, you are the universe. It belongs to you, it's yourself. And also, all that is produced in the universe belongs to it because itself belongs to all that is produced in the universe. So he's trying with some paradoxes to create. And the question is, in this case, where or what is the artwork for Soto? Is it the idea? Is it the object? Is it the act of participation? Or is it the whole experience? Because according to what you've been saying, it's actually this. It's not only breaking up the works from the wall or the paintings in several parts and having people participating into a painting as human beings and as works of art. So what is it? There is not a single definition, and this is what I will be asking you about how Soto would define his work, because it would require his own presence to activate it or to make it alive, or not.
Well, I think that it's the whole experience, because I think that from the very beginning, Soto was always looking a way to involve the viewer. I mean, Soto, if I'm not mistaken, he was never a traditional painter. He was very interested in Cubism. Yeah. And that's the beginning, that's the starting point for him. So he was not interested in painting landscapes or painting figures like everyone else. He was very intrigued by Cubism, and the fact that he couldn't get this information in Venezuela was what propelled him to move to Paris, you know, and to be able to then look at some of the work that he had seen some examples of in Venezuela, Mondrian, you know, Picasso, I'm sorry? Malevich, who was so important to him, and so on. And in his quest, as soon as he got to France, he began to look at all this work. So I think that, because not being a traditional painter, he didn't look at a painting as a window. And as being, you know, like we always say, you know, when you look at a Renaissance painting, it's as if you stood in front of a window and you looked out. And for him, it was what was behind, I think, in a way. He said, well, it's not just what's in front of you, but what's surrounding you. So you are in the painting. So from that beginning, from that point on, his idea was always about relationships. How do you relate the artwork to the spectator? How do you relate the elements within a composition? You know, the elements have to have a relationship. They're just not there by chance. And so he begins to separate things, and then he creates these transparent works in which you begin to involve the spectator, you know. When you look at these works that are in two planes and you move from left to right or from right to left, then a movement happens. And so this idea of always bringing more elements than usual is, for me, what I think he thinks he wanted to be the whole experience.
The whole experience.
Yeah. Which in a way, I think culminates in the penetrable, but at the same time, it depends on what you bring into it, because that's another important aspect in terms of your participation. It's not just being in the work, but it's also the experiences that you've had in your life or your mind that you bring into the work, and that you become one with that work.
So in your opinion, the culmination of all the progressions, the extensions, and the rivales, and all that, they all culminate into the penetrabile as maybe the ultimate expression of Soto's artworks?
I think so in a way, but to me the ones that are actually more communal experiences, the ones that happen when there's large numbers of people.
Okay.
Because, yeah, I think that in a way
that's the combination.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting. I was, you know, when you think, for example, of artists' work with light and space, and you can think of California artists like Robert Irwin or James Turrell, those experiences, even though you penetrate the artwork, you go into it, become this kind of more spiritual, isolated experiences that are better experiences on a one-to-one. Well, for Soto and other artists, it was the community. You know, the best way to actually experience one of these works is when you're with a lot more people, not only on your own.
Can I follow up on that? Because, Aria said that we have to remember that the film was taken in '65, and if this film acted as a user manual and demonstrated that basically Soto's work is about disturbance. It's about sensorial disturbance, etc. And the date, 68, gives a kind of opens the possibility to read it as a political allegory and connect the sensorial disturbance as an experience to the political disturbance, which wasn't just in Paris but also in Mexico, etc. So if we can politicize the sensorial kind of dislocation, what every work deals with, and then we can connect back to the idea what Alma brought in, that it's communal. Viewing, participation becomes a communal, collective kind of experience. There is a connection there. So the disturbance and the collective kind of further helps us to think about the political dimension of these works. And not in a literal sense. I will talk about that later.
In fact,
but as a kind of, really as a kind of, almost as a kind of allegory of collective disturbance, also in political terms. And the communal thing, just one, we all remember Vasarely, right? Vasarely when he said, and of course he never applied to his own work, but nonetheless in the early 50s, I think, was it 53 or 54, when in Paris everyone was basically working manifestos, right? Over every second month someone had to kind of come up with something very new. And he wrote that geometric art, as opposed to, of course, abstraction lyrique and formal, etc., that geometric art is about collectives. So the l'art communautaire. It's a communal collective thing. So.
Al mismo tiempo hay otra dimensión interesante en Soto, que no es solamente esa dimensión colectiva y política de la obra que permite que se penetre.
At the same time, there's another dimension that's interesting in Soto's work, not just the political or the collective dimension.
Y es que quiere decirnos algo.
He actually wants to tell us something.
Es decir, es una obra que está pensada para decirnos que la esencia de todo lo que existe en el universo es inmaterial.
It's work that is, its point is to tell us that everything in the universe, the essence of the universe, is trying to tell us something about that.
Sí, eso es central en nosotros. Estas formas que parecen flotar, que son cubos, pero que no son sólidos.
These floating forms, which are squares,
son cubos.
cubes.
Yeah, but they're, as you're saying, they're not solid.
Que vibran cuando nos desplazamos en torno a ellos.
That vibrate when we walk around them.
Quieren decirnos eso, y eso para Soto es central.
They want to talk to us about these things, and for Soto that is essential.
O sea que la experiencia sola y el background que uno trae no basta para él.
The experience itself and the background that one brings to it is not enough.
Si la obra no logra hacernos ver eso que él cree esencial.
If the work does not bring us to see what he considers to be essential.
Y que fue para él un descubrimiento de la ciencia moderna, que la materia toda del universo, del cuerpo, incluso, son energía.
This was an essential idea for him, that matter, the energy of matter made up the universe.
Y por eso lo que él quiere que veamos son esas especies de masas que emergen mientras nos desplazamos.
What he wants us to see are the masses that emerge as we move around the piece.
Eso es capital, ¿no?
I think that is essential.
I think there's another aspect that I was just thinking about that I'd like to bring up, and perhaps today we're more used to it, but at the time that Soto made these pieces, we were not, and it's the fact that these pieces can be reconstructed without the artist, without the help of the artist.
This is also very essential and important. Yes.
Exactly, it's really truly important because the works are manufactured in a way that they're very low-tech. They're very simple.
It's art craft.
It's craft. Anyone can make the work under the direction of the artist, and once the work is made, the work is put away and then brought out and reconstructed without him. There is no need for the artist. So for him, I think it was kind of the real definition of conceptual art. You know, that you can reconstruct the artist without the work without the help of the artist.
I know a little anecdote about this, and without making names, there's a big museum here in the United States who was in talks with Soto when Soto was still alive, and unfortunately right before he was about to depart, that they were in talks for a huge Manhattan, like one that you actually showed up in Washington, and then he died. But they had already, he had already drawn it and completely had the whole sketch down on paper, and it was done. The idea was there. He died, and then after a year or two, the museum contacted the family, and they closed the agreement. And now next year, this museum is actually, they created a new wing, and next year this museum is actually realizing the gentleman who actually came here from France to put these works together, is now putting it all together, and he will himself build it in this museum. Mr. Pelvoisin. Mr. Pelvoisin was one of the last helper from with Soto, yes. He worked with him some 10 years, but it was very intensive because he was in charge of all the monumental works. And he tells a story, who is now like the official restorer for Soto's work around the world, about when he was not in Venezuela for some reason, and then Soto receives a phone call, and by, I guess it was Pompidou, they needed some help, or they wanted to know details about their Penetralia. And they said, oh, yes, Soto answered on the phone, yes, don't worry, I'll send you Soto Bis, which is this gentleman who's actually, by Soto himself, described as himself. He'll do it for me. It's the same.